Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. Before we can truly understand how medieval people slept, we must first step into their world when the sun went down, because in the Middle Ages, night was not just the absence of daylight, it was a powerful force that shaped every part of life. Darkness was not gentle or romantic. It was deep, heavy, and absolute. When the sun disappeared below the horizon, villages did not glow softly the way modern towns do today. Instead, they vanished into shadow. Roads dissolved into blackness. Fields became silent and unseen. The night arrived suddenly, and with it came a sense of stillness mixed with unease. There were no electric lights, no glowing windows, no street lamps guiding travelers home. Once darkness fell, most people stayed where they were. Moving outside at night was dangerous. Not only because of wild animals or thieves, but because people genuinely feared what they could not see. Darkness was believed to hide danger, both physical and spiritual. Even familiar paths could become frightening once the light faded. Light itself was precious. Candles were not cheap, and most were made from animal fat, which burned unevenly and produced thick smoke with an unpleasant smell. Beeswax candles were cleaner and brighter, but only wealthy households could afford them. Oil lamps existed, but fuel was limited. For most families, using light after sunset was done carefully and sparingly. A single candle might be shared among several people, and once it burned low, it was extinguished. Because of this, medieval evenings were short. As the sky darkened, work came to an end. Farmers returned from the fields. Craftsmen laid down their tools. Shops closed early. After a simple evening meal, families gathered indoors, often in one shared room, and prepared for sleep. This was not because they were unusually tired, but because there was simply nothing left to do in the dark. The sun was the clock. Medieval people lived by natural rhythms rather than fixed schedules. They woke with daylight and rested when darkness arrived. There were no alarm clocks, no pressure to stay awake late, and no artificial extension of the day. Time itself felt slower. Life followed the seasons, the length of days, and the cycle of light and dark. But sleep in the medieval world was not one long, peaceful stretch the way many people expect today. Instead, it followed a rhythm that had guided human rest for thousands of years. Shortly after sunset, people went to bed and entered what they called their first sleep. This was a deep, heavy rest that came easily after long hours of physical labor. Farming, hauling water, caring for animals, cooking over fires, daily life demanded constant movement and strength. When people lay down, their bodies welcomed sleep quickly. This first sleep was often the deepest. Medieval writers described it as a time when the body truly restored itself. Muscles relaxed. Breathing slowed. The world outside grew quiet. For a few hours, sleep was complete and undisturbed. Then, sometime in the middle of the night, something unexpected happened. People woke up. This waking was not caused by noise or fear. It was not a sign of illness or poor sleep. It was natural, predictable, and shared by nearly everyone. Medieval texts mention it so casually that it is clear this experience was universal. People simply opened their eyes, rose from their beds, and began the quiet middle part of the night. To modern ears, this may sound like insomnia. But to medieval people, it was completely normal. During this waking period, the world was at its quietest. Fires burned low. Winds whispered outside. Animals shifted in their stalls. This was a time unlike any other, free from the demands of daylight labor. For many, it was the only truly peaceful hour of the day. Some people prayed during this time. Religious belief was woven deeply into medieval life, and the stillness of night was believed to be especially sacred. Prayers spoken in darkness were thought to carry more power. Many believed that God listened more closely when the world was silent. Certain prayers were written specifically for this hour, and monks and nuns structured their lives around waking in the night to pray. Others used this time for quiet reflection. In a world without books for most people, without entertainment, without privacy, these moments alone with one's thoughts were rare. People reflected on their actions, their fears, their hopes, and their future. They considered family matters, upcoming work, and spiritual concerns. This quiet thinking shaped how medieval people understood themselves and their place in the world. Some households used the time practically. Fires were checked to make sure they had not gone out. Animals were tended if necessary. Tools were prepared for the morning. Bread dough might be checked or set aside. Everything was done slowly, without hurry. Couples often believed this was the best time for closeness. The body had already rested, and the mind was calm. Medieval medical writings even suggested that intimacy during this time was healthier than during the day. Again, this was spoken of openly and without shame. Importantly, there was no anxiety about waking in the night. No one worried about losing sleep. People trusted that rest would return naturally, and it always did. After 1 or 2 hours, medieval people returned to their beds and drifted into their second sleep, which lasted until dawn. This rhythm shaped the medieval understanding of rest. Sleep was not something to be controlled or measured. It was something to be experienced in stages, guided by darkness and light rather than by strict rules. The body knew what to do. Seasonal changes also influenced sleep. In winter, nights were long, and people slept more. In summer, when daylight lasted longer, evenings extended and sleep shortened. This flexibility was natural and accepted. There was no single, correct, amount of sleep. Even the idea of going to bed carried different meaning. Beds were not private retreats. They were functional spaces meant for warmth and rest. Most homes consisted of 1 or 2 rooms, and sleeping often took place in the same area where people cooked, ate, and worked during the day. Despite the simplicity and hardship of medieval life, there was a quiet wisdom in how people rested. Their sleep followed the natural world instead of fighting it. Darkness was not something to defeat with light, but something to move within carefully. Yet, this world of natural rhythm existed alongside constant uncertainty. Night was peaceful, but it was also frightening. Without light, imagination filled the shadows. Sounds carried farther. A creaking beam or a distant animal could stir fear. People believed night belonged to forces beyond human control. And still, every evening, medieval people lay down and closed their eyes. They trusted the darkness. They trusted their faith. They trusted the rhythm that had guided humans long before clocks, cities, and electricity existed. Understanding this world of darkness is the key to understanding medieval sleep. It was a life shaped by the sun, surrendered to the night, and balanced between rest and wakefulness in a way that feels strange to us now, yet deeply human. As the fire burned low and the world outside disappeared into shadow, medieval people entered sleep not as an escape, but as a natural continuation of the day. And in that darkness, their strange and fascinating sleep habits were born. As the night deepened and the first sleep slowly loosened its grip, medieval people entered one of the strangest and most forgotten parts of their daily rhythm, the quiet waking in the middle of the night. This moment did not come with alarm or fear. There were no clocks ticking toward a fixed hour, no sudden jolts of panic. Instead, eyes opened gently. Bodies shifted beneath heavy blankets. Breathing slowed as awareness returned. For medieval people, this was not an interruption of sleep. It was simply the next stage of it. This waking usually happened several hours after sunset, often around what we would now call midnight. The house was silent. Fires had burned low, glowing softly rather than blazing. Outside, the world felt distant and still. This was the deepest part of the night, when even animals were quiet. And yet, inside homes across medieval towns and villages, people were awake. They did not rush. They did not fight the wakefulness. There was no frustration about not being asleep. Instead, medieval people accepted this time as natural and even valuable. Many medieval writings refer to it casually, calling it the watch, the between sleep, or simply the time after the first rest. The fact that it required no explanation tells us just how normal it was. For many, the first instinct during this waking hour was prayer. Religion shaped medieval life at every level, and the silence of the night was believed to be especially sacred. People thought that prayers spoken when the world was quiet traveled farther, reaching God more clearly. Some believed angels were closer at night. Others feared demons, but trusted that prayer offered protection. In monasteries and convents, this belief became strict routine. Monks and nuns were required to wake in the night for structured prayer services. Their sleep was deliberately broken so that they could stand in cold stone chapels, chanting softly in candlelight. This practice was not seen as a burden, but as devotion. Ordinary people, even those who could not read, followed similar habits in their own homes, whispering familiar prayers learned by memory. Beyond religion, this waking hour was also a time of thought. Medieval life during the day was exhausting. Physical labor filled every hour of daylight. Farming, carrying water, chopping wood, repairing tools, caring for animals, there was little space for reflection. The night offered something rare, stillness. During this time, people thought about their families, their worries, their hopes, and their fears. They reflected on arguments, planned work for the next day, and considered spiritual matters. Without noise or distraction, the mind wandered freely. This quiet thinking shaped medieval psychology more than we often realize. Some medieval medical writers even believed this period of wakefulness was essential for mental balance. They argued that thoughts processed during this time helped the body and soul remain healthy. Sleep was not meant to be continuous. It was meant to be broken, allowing the mind to surface gently before sinking again. Households also used this time for practical tasks. Fires needed attention. A dying flame could mean cold or danger before morning. Someone might rise to stir embers or add a small piece of wood. Animals occasionally needed checking, especially during winter or lambing season. A cow giving birth or a restless horse could not wait until dawn. Food preparation sometimes occurred during this hour. Bread dough might be checked or set aside. Cheese left to age might be inspected. Everything was done slowly, without urgency. There was no rush to return to bed. For couples, this waking hour often held special meaning. Medieval medical beliefs suggested that intimacy during this time was healthier and more natural. The body was rested, the stomach empty, and the mind calm. Many texts refer to this moment as ideal for closeness between husband and wife. Again, this was not hidden or shameful. It was simply part of life's rhythm. Importantly, this waking hour was not brightly lit. Candles were rarely burned unless absolutely necessary. Light was soft, flickering, and minimal. Many activities were done almost in darkness, guided by memory rather than sight. This dim environment helped maintain a sense of calm and prevented full alertness. After 1 or 2 hours, sleep returned naturally. There was no effort to force it. People lay back down, adjusted blankets, and drifted into their second sleep. This sleep was lighter than the first, filled with dreams and shorter cycles, lasting until dawn. Dreams themselves were taken seriously. Medieval people believed dreams seen during the second sleep were more meaningful. Because the mind had already rested, dreams were thought to be clearer, more symbolic, and more likely to carry messages. Some dreams were recorded and discussed. Others were shared with priests or elders for interpretation. This two-part sleep pattern remained common for centuries. It only began to disappear much later, as artificial lighting spread and work schedules changed. When evenings grew longer and nights brighter, people delayed bedtime. The space between sleeps slowly vanished, and continuous sleep became the norm. What is remarkable is how relaxed medieval people were about sleep. There was no fear of waking too early. No pressure to fall asleep quickly. No anxiety about exact hours. Sleep was trusted. It came, it went, and it returned. Modern sleep struggles often feel urgent and stressful. Medieval sleep was slower, gentler, and more forgiving. Waking in the night was not a problem to be solved. It was simply part of being human. This forgotten rhythm reminds us that the human body has not changed as much as we think. The discomfort many people feel today when they wake at night may not be unnatural at all. It may be an echo of an older pattern, buried beneath modern expectations. In the medieval world, the night was long, quiet, and shared. And within it, this strange waking hour offered prayer, reflection, closeness, and calm. It was a pause between sleeps, a bridge between rest, and a moment when the world seemed to hold its breath. As the fire dimmed and the silence deepened, medieval people returned to their beds without worry. The second sleep awaited them, just as it always had. And the night continued its slow passage toward dawn. As the night moved forward and households settled into their quiet rhythm, the reality of medieval sleeping spaces revealed just how different rest was in the Middle Ages. Sleep was rarely private, rarely comfortable by modern standards, and almost never solitary. To understand medieval sleep fully, we must imagine a world where the bed was not a personal sanctuary, but a shared and practical object, shaped by necessity rather than comfort. Beds were expensive and difficult to produce. Wood had to be cut, shaped, and assembled by hand. Mattresses were filled with straw, hay, dried leaves, or feathers, depending on wealth. Over time, these fillings flattened, shifted, and became uneven. They attracted insects, absorbed moisture, and carried smells. Cleanliness was hard to maintain, not because people did not care, but because washing bedding required time, water, and physical effort that few could spare regularly. Because beds were valuable, many families owned only one. This single bed became the sleeping place for parents and children alike. Infants slept beside mothers. Young children crowded close for warmth. Older children often slept at the foot of the bed or on pallets nearby. In some homes, grandparents or extended family members shared the same space. Privacy, as we understand it today, simply did not exist. This closeness was not seen as strange. It was normal. Bodies provided warmth, especially during cold winters when fires burned low to conserve fuel. Blankets were heavy but limited in number. Sharing heat was practical and, in many cases, necessary for survival. Servants, apprentices, and laborers often slept wherever space allowed. Some rested on the floor near their employers' beds. Others slept in kitchens, barns, or storage rooms. Comfort was secondary. The goal was rest, warmth, and readiness for the next day's work. In wealthier households, beds were larger and softer, filled with feathers rather than straw. But even here, sleep was rarely private. Noble families often slept in shared chambers. Servants stayed nearby at night to attend to needs, protect against danger, or maintain fires. Even kings were rarely alone when they slept. Royal beds were placed in rooms filled with attendants, guards, and household members. Beds themselves were high off the ground, partly to protect sleepers from drafts and pests. Climbing into bed required effort, often using stools. Curtains sometimes surrounded the bed, not for privacy, but to block cold air and retain warmth. These bed hangings also offered some protection from insects and dust. In inns and roadside lodgings, sleeping arrangements were even more communal. Travelers often shared beds with strangers. A large bed might hold several unrelated people, all resting side by side. This was not considered unsafe or improper. It was expected. Inns were places of necessity, not comfort. Travelers accepted these conditions without complaint. Social rules guided shared sleeping. People slept fully clothed or partially dressed. Positions were chosen carefully. Modesty existed, but it operated within the reality of shared space. Children learned these customs early, growing up in a world where bodies rested together without embarrassment. Sleep sounds filled the night. Snoring, coughing, murmured prayers, and restless movements were normal. Silence, when it came, was broken easily. And yet, people adapted. The human body learns to rest even in noise, and medieval people were no exception. Despite these crowded conditions, sleep was deeply social. Stories were told before bed. Prayers were spoken together. The night was shared, not isolated. Fear was softened by presence. Darkness felt less threatening when others were nearby. This closeness extended beyond family. In some communities, neighbors slept in shared spaces during cold seasons or times of danger. Safety came from numbers. Being alone at night was often more frightening than sharing space. The idea of sleeping alone in a separate room would have seemed lonely to many medieval people. Sleep was woven into the fabric of community life. It was something done together, not apart. Even the concept of bedtime differed. There was no strict separation between waking life and sleeping life. People might lie down, rise again, talk, pray, or eat before returning to rest. The bed was not only for sleep, but for birth, illness, conversation, and death. It was the center of domestic life. Children learned to sleep by observing others. There were no bedtime routines as we know them today. No quiet nurseries. Sleep was learned through participation, not instruction. These sleeping arrangements shaped medieval attitudes toward the body. Bodies were practical, not private. Physical closeness did not carry the same meaning it does today. Comfort came from familiarity rather than softness. Yet, despite this acceptance, sleep was not always easy. Insects bit. Mattresses shifted. Cold crept in. Drafts moved through poorly sealed walls. Still, people slept. The body adapted. Exhaustion helped. Habit carried them through. Looking back, these shared sleeping spaces may seem uncomfortable or even unsettling. But for medieval people, they were normal. They reflected a world where resources were limited, survival depended on cooperation, and individuality was less important than community. Sleep was shaped by necessity, not preference. And within those limits, medieval people found rest, warmth, and a sense of belonging. As the night deepened and bodies settled into shared beds, the medieval world rested together, breathing, dreaming, and enduring the darkness side by side. As the night deepened and the world outside disappeared into darkness, medieval sleep became surrounded by fear, belief, and unseen danger. For people living in the Middle Ages, night was not simply a time for rest. It was a dangerous border between the living world and forces they could not fully understand. Darkness was believed to invite evil, and sleep was the moment when a person was most vulnerable. Without artificial light, shadows seemed alive. Sounds carried farther in the quiet night, and the mind filled the darkness with imagination. A creaking beam, the howl of wind, or the cry of an animal could quickly turn into something far more terrifying. Many believed the night belonged to demons, witches, and restless spirits who wandered freely while humans slept. Sleep itself was viewed with suspicion. When the body rested, the soul was thought to loosen its hold, making it easier for evil forces to attack. Nightmares were not dismissed as dreams. They were taken seriously, often seen as warnings from God or attacks from dark spirits. A frightening dream could be a sign of sin, moral weakness, or spiritual danger. One of the most feared experiences was what we now call sleep paralysis. Medieval people described waking unable to move, struggling to breathe, and feeling a heavy presence pressing down on their chest. They believed this was caused by a demon or night spirit. Illustrations from the period often showed dark figures sitting on sleeping bodies, stealing breath and strength. This experience was terrifying and widely discussed, reinforcing the belief that sleep was not safe. Because of these fears, religion played a powerful role in controlling how people slept. The Church offered guidance on proper sleeping behavior, turning rest into a moral act. Sleeping too much was condemned as laziness and a sign of spiritual weakness. Sleeping during the day was suspicious and often discouraged, especially for healthy adults. Even the way one slept mattered. Certain sleeping positions were considered dangerous. Lying on the back was sometimes discouraged because it was believed to invite sinful thoughts or demonic attacks. Sleeping on the stomach was seen as improper or unhealthy. People were advised to sleep on their side, in modest positions, as a way to protect both body and soul. Sleeping naked was also discouraged in many religious teachings. Modesty was important even in sleep, and clothing was believed to offer spiritual protection. Being uncovered made a person vulnerable, not just physically, but morally. Clothing, like prayer, was a barrier against temptation and evil. Before going to bed, prayers were essential. Families often prayed together, asking for protection through the night. Many whispered familiar prayers repeatedly until sleep came. Holy words were believed to create a shield against darkness. Some prayers were specifically written for nighttime, focusing on safety, forgiveness, and protection from evil. Religious objects were commonly kept close during sleep. Crosses, rosaries, relics, and holy texts were placed near beds or worn on the body. Some people sewed small religious symbols into their clothing or bedding. These items were believed to guard the sleeper and drive away evil spirits. Dreams held special meaning in medieval belief. They were thought to carry messages from God, warnings of future events, or signs of hidden sin. Some dreams were recorded and discussed with priests or elders. Others were feared and kept secret. A disturbing dream could cause anxiety long after waking, shaping behavior and belief. Not all dreams were considered evil. Some were believed to be divine visions. Stories of saints receiving messages in dreams were common. This blurred the line between sleep and spirituality, making rest itself a sacred and dangerous experience. Fear of the night also influenced how people arranged their homes. Beds were often placed away from doors and windows. Fires were kept low but not extinguished, as complete darkness was believed to invite evil. In some households, a light was left burning as protection, even if fuel was precious. Children were taught early to fear the night. Stories of spirits and demons were used to explain danger and enforce obedience. While these stories frightened children, they also helped prepare them for a world where night was genuinely risky. Despite all this fear, medieval people slept every night. They did not have a choice. Faith helped them face the darkness. Prayer replaced control. Belief offered comfort where knowledge could not. Sleep was not expected to be peaceful. It was endured. It was a trial the body faced each night. Waking alive in the morning was something to be grateful for. In this world, sleep was never just rest. It was a spiritual journey, a test of faith, and a moment of vulnerability. The night held danger, but it also held meaning. And in that balance between fear and belief, medieval people found the courage to close their eyes once more. As we look back on the strange sleep habits of medieval people, it becomes clear that sleep in the Middle Ages was never just about resting the body. It was shaped by darkness, belief, community, and survival. While their habits may seem uncomfortable, or even frightening to us today, they reveal a deeper truth about how humans adapt to their world. Medieval people did not expect sleep to be perfect. They did not demand silence, privacy, or uninterrupted rest. Instead, they accepted sleep as something that arrived in stages, something shared with others, and something deeply connected to the natural world. Waking in the night was not a failure. It was normal. It was expected. This acceptance alone changed the experience of rest. Today, many people worry when they wake during the night. They check clocks, count hours, and feel anxiety about not sleeping enough. Medieval people had no such concerns. They trusted the rhythm of their bodies. Sleep came, left, and returned without pressure. This calm acceptance may be one of the most valuable lessons we can take from the past. The medieval relationship with darkness also offers insight. Night was not pushed away with light. It was respected. Darkness signaled rest, reflection, and caution. While it brought fear, it also brought quiet. Modern life has almost erased true darkness, replacing it with constant light and stimulation. In doing so, we may have lost something essential. Community played a major role in medieval sleep. People slept together, shared warmth, and faced the night side by side. Sleep was not an isolated experience. It was part of family life, household life, and social structure. Loneliness during sleep was rare. Even fear was easier to face when others were nearby. This closeness shaped emotional resilience. Children grew up surrounded by others at night, learning that darkness was something to endure together. Elders rested among family, not separated into quiet rooms. Sleep reinforced bonds rather than separating individuals. Belief also shaped medieval rest. Faith offered protection where knowledge was limited. Prayer replaced control. Religious rituals gave meaning to fear and comfort to uncertainty. While modern understanding explains dreams and sleep disorders medically, medieval belief provided emotional structure in a dangerous world. Their fear of night was not entirely unreasonable. Without light, safety, or medical knowledge, darkness truly was dangerous. Yet, despite this, medieval people slept. They trusted their faith, their community, and the natural rhythm of life. Modern sleep science now suggests that broken sleep may not be as unnatural as once thought. Studies show that waking in the night can be part of a healthy sleep cycle. In this way, medieval habits echo within us. The body remembers patterns older than modern schedules. This does not mean medieval sleep was better. It was harder. It was colder. It was less comfortable. But it was honest. It followed the world as it was, not as people wished it to be. Perhaps the greatest lesson medieval sleep offers is acceptance. Acceptance of imperfection. Acceptance of change. Acceptance of vulnerability. Sleep was never a performance to be optimized. It was a natural process shaped by environment and belief. When sleep was shared, feared, and respected, it became something deeply human. As artificial light spread and society changed, sleep slowly transformed. Privacy increased. Comfort improved. But anxiety grew. The night became shorter, louder, and more demanding. Looking back, medieval people remind us that rest does not need to be controlled to be meaningful. It needs to be allowed. As the medieval night fades into history, one quiet truth remains. Humans have always slept in the way their world allowed them to. And perhaps, in understanding how they rested in darkness, we can learn to rest more gently ourselves. Thank you for listening. May your night be calm, your rest deep, and your sleep peaceful.